What if the world we know today was just a shadow of what it could have been? What if, in the chaos of World War II, Japan's empire extended not only across the Pacific, but all the way to America's shores, rewriting history forever? Imagine a United States with American flags torn down and replaced by Japan's rising sun, where Japanese becomes the language of schools and Tokyo pulls the strings in Washington. In this world, familiar cities take on a foreign face, and life itself hangs in a delicate balance. This isn't just an alternate history, it's a glimpse into a chilling reality that nearly came to pass. Let's step into this alternate world, where everything America stood for was at the mercy of a different empire. Chapter 1. The war turns in an unexpected direction. It's early 1942. Japan's naval forces strike Pearl Harbor, but this time they push forward with an intensity beyond anything the Allies expect. After seizing Hawaii, Japan mobilizes its forces, advancing towards the U.S. mainland. This marks the beginning of a larger plan to establish Japan's dominance not just in the Pacific, but across the American continent. Cities along the West Coast, from San Diego to Seattle, find themselves under siege. Japanese forces take control of coastal defenses, airfields, and cities in a swift, unrelenting campaign. The sight of Japanese soldiers patrolling American streets is shocking to a nation that had never faced occupation. Schools close down, and civilians brace for the unimaginable reality that the United States is no longer safe. Chapter 2. A New Life Under Occupation. The entire West Coast now answers to the Japanese Empire. A strict regime emerges, transforming daily life for millions. Japanese becomes the official language in schools. The US dollar is replaced by the yen. Icons of American culture vanish. Hollywood studios shut down or adapt to Japanese censorship. News broadcasts are controlled, and propaganda replaces familiar American songs and stories. Japanese customs seep into everyday life, from the food on store shelves to the holidays celebrated in occupied cities. For the first time, Americans face life under a foreign authority. Laws restrict movement, and citizens learn to bow to new officials. Resistance is met with swift punishment, and curfews ensure that streets are quiet by nightfall. Families are torn between compliance for survival and the desire to hold on to their American identity. Chapter 3. Resistance in the Shadows. Not everyone can accept life under Japanese rule. Across the country, resistance movements begin to form. In occupied zones, groups meet in secret to plot small acts of defiance, from sabotaging Japanese supply lines to spreading forbidden news. The resistance's leaders communicate in code, using symbols and signals to stay one step ahead of Japanese officials. One figure, a former U.S. Army captain known only as the Hawk, becomes a beacon of hope. He leads a growing network of civilians, ex-soldiers, and patriots who refuse to surrender their homeland. They plan daring raids, disrupt infrastructure, and inspire others across the country to rise against the occupiers. These acts of defiance may seem small, but they plant seeds of rebellion that began to spread beyond the occupied territories. Chapter 4. The Heart of a Divided Nation. The United States becomes two worlds: occupied America under Japanese control on the West Coast, and free America east of the Rocky Mountains. In Washington, D.C., the government fights to maintain national morale while struggling to regain lost territory. Tensions flare between those living under Japanese rule and those in the free states, as each side experiences vastly different realities. The American government calls on citizens to hold on to their identity, urging them not to forget who they are or where they come from. Families separated by the occupation endure the pain of loss, while soldiers and civilians alike hope for a day when their country will be whole again. Meanwhile, the Japanese Empire strengthens its hold, expanding its reach with military bases and Japanese-influenced cities that become permanent fixtures of life on the West Coast. Chapter 5. Rebellion sparks a turning point. After years of occupation, the resistance grows too powerful to ignore. The Hawks network expands, and now, even American soldiers who evaded capture organize under his leadership. The resistance's influence spreads, from underground newspapers to covert radio broadcasts. Each act of defiance fuels a new surge of courage among civilians, and whispers of a rebellion sweep through occupied cities. In a moment of coordinated bravery, resistance cells across the West Coast launch a series of surprise strikes targeting Japanese military installations, supply depots, and government offices. For the first time, Japanese forces face an organized, large-scale revolt on American soil. Neighborhoods in cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles erupt in defiance, with civilians and resistance fighters standing together to reclaim their streets. The struggle is brutal, but each victory emboldens the resistance. Japanese forces are stretched thin, struggling to maintain control, and for the first time, the prospect of liberation seems possible. The idea that the United States might rise from this occupation brings a flicker of hope back to a divided nation. Chapter 6. A Nation Reclaimed and the Legacy of Occupation. After intense fighting, the Japanese government, overwhelmed by the cost and instability of maintaining control over the U.S., agrees to withdraw its forces. American flags fly once again over California, Washington, and Oregon, but the scars of occupation remain. Cities bear the marks of years of suppression, and Americans face the challenge of rebuilding a fractured society. Yet the experience of occupation leaves a lasting impact on American culture. Japanese influences linger in architecture, food, and even certain customs, creating a unique blend of East and West in the once occupied territories. Families separated by the occupation reunite, but the memory of those years lingers, shaping a new American identity. As the nation rebuilds, there's a question that no one can ignore. How close did we come to a world that would have looked entirely different? What might have happened if the resistance had failed, or if Japanese rule had solidified its place in American history? The legacy of this alternate world remains a reminder of how fragile freedom can be, and of the resilience that can bring a nation back from the brink. This alternate history isn't just a what-if. It's a chilling reminder of the strength it takes to hold on to one's identity, and the cost of freedom in a world where it can be taken away. What would life look like now if those brave resistance fighters hadn't stood up? And with the world's balance of power constantly shifting, who's to say it couldn't happen again somewhere, someday? The echoes of this imagined past leave us with a haunting question that may never have a final answer.